All right, folks, we are live. CRI Coach Roundtable number 1. Just getting food, getting settled with some beer. Peter Donohoe, Coach Bodie. We got Tom Siddall setting us up. We'll be started in a second here.
Is that a mic boom on top?
Yeah.
I actually cooked, and then I started eating coffee.
We are live. Rock and roll. Cool. You got some food?
I did.
How's everybody doing? Yeah? Good food? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know really well. We graduated the same year out of school.
Our first spill.
Just napkins. Well, there might be a stack of paper towels in the cleaning room or on top of the fridge in the storage room. We also just grabbed the mop.
Do that,
It's not a party without a spill.
Yeah.
You know?
Do that, yeah.
We know it's a good quick roundtable, right? Oh, there we go. What you got?
Yeah, I got this because John just kicked my set over.
All right. Thank you to Craft Beer Sellers. They're our partner here for the Coach Roundtables at CRI. Tonight is Harpoon Night. Plenty of craft deliciousness. How you doing, okay?
Good, how are you?
Good. Look at this table.
So many hoppy beers.
You guys made new friends? Do you guys know that Alyssa and I met at CrossFit Boston probably like
5 years ago?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like where I met Alex, where I met my wife.
Yeah.
We're all the same gym. And now she's head coach at Arlington Belmont?
For the girls.
For the girls, yeah.
And then I know this guy.
Oh, yeah?
She was a freshman rower on the team.
Wow. Nice. Oh, Bodie. Coach Bodie.
So Tom's good.
Yeah. And I was going to hook you up with a mic, actually. Welcome. So yeah, if you want to do a little intro and get us going, I'm just going to mic him up and
Yeah. Great.
we'll be good to go. We're live, so.
Oh, perfect. All right.
Cool.
So we're going to get started here. Everybody's ready. So thank you guys, thank you guys all for coming to the first resurgence. So we're going to just start quickly by going around the room and seeing where people are from. We got a couple questions up here. Who do you coach? And, who you are, who do you coach, and what are your interests about tonight? So maybe if we want to start here and go around each table.
Sure. Noel Pardo, Tabor Academy, boys varsity. Interest for me is just finding out how to get my kids to get stronger and fitter on the in the off season, and there's never enough time at a boarding school.
I'm Beatrice Sims. I coach boys novice and some adult rec at CRI. Just interested in learning.
I coach here at CRI, our military program, and then I also coach LaSalle College's Crew Club. And I'm just here to learn as much as I can so I can transfer it over to my athletes.
Hi, I'm Andy. I work in the shop here, repairing boats, and I also develop and design adapted equipment for our adaptive and para teams here. I'm just here to learn whenever I can.
I'm Marilyn. I also work here at CRI. I help coordinate the para and the military programs, and I do a lot of work with Andy developing equipment. And there's certainly other ways I'd like to introduce health and strength and wellness to the athletes in all of my programs that I help coordinate and build that into the programming. So here to learn about it.
My name is Sam. I coach CRI and also DBNN. I mostly coach high school age rowers and always interested to learn more about training.
My name is John. I coach in this very room. My cohort are the aspiring and actual national team para rowers, and to finish first you have to finish, so I want to learn about durability.
Yeah, I'm Mitch. I coach here at CRI. I'm in the IRL with Tom. I also coach novice boys at Bromfield Acton Boxborough. And I'm here because I heard Pat's pulled pork was on the menu. And I also want to learn about training kids here.
Great. You want to jump over this table? Start with you right here.
Andy O'Brien, boys coach Arlington Belmont crew. I'd like to learn, I guess, building muscle, symmetry, and without injury.
I'm Joanna Coombs. I'm the novice girls coach at Arlington Mont, and I'm here to learn more about winter training and kind of how to transition from the water to in the earth. Alyssa Pomfrey, varsity girls at Arlington Belmont, and I'm here to learn more about keeping kids engaged during the winter season, especially when they get bored with the earth.
I'm Nick Wright, the head coach of Lake Insignia Community Rowing, and I helped out with the Ugandan national team. I'm just interested in training without the earth.
You want to grab you in the back quickly?
I'm Charlie Weems. I'm the director of rowing and head coach, varsity coach of boys at Baruch Academy. And program is 5 years old, and we're looking at transitioning our athletes through the winter months into spring. They have no flexibility or strength, so that's one of our fact of life. So we're anxious to see how we can activate muscles that have either never been activated or are dormant.
Great. Do you want to go ahead and do a quick introduction, or did I grab you too soon? After you.
Let me regroup.
All right, no problem. Grace, you want to pick back up?
I'm Grace Strugan. I volunteered a little bit over the fall at Lake Quinsigamond with Coach Nick. I'm in college still. I row. I'm at school in Worcester right now, but in the spring I'll be rowing at UMass. And I'm just here to learn about coaching and kind of figure out if it's something I want to do and get to know some people and figure out just learn about training. Yeah. Okay.
I'm Dan Mahoney. I work with Nick Grace at Lake Insignia, and I'm also a volunteer at Cold Cross for Lindsay. I'm really interested in learning also conditioning without the earth and some more out-of-the-box ways to train over winter.
I'm Erin McConnell. And I work with a lot of rowers, and so I'm kind of looking to not only learn some new exercises from Peter today, but also maybe kind of keep in touch with the coaching perspective of things and kind of be able to hear some of that discussion today.
Hi, I'm Bodie. I'm coaching here at Community Rowing since 2009, and generally work with the adolescent populations. I do some recreational sort of sculling coaching as well. I also have been really enjoying working in the shop more recently. It's something that I used to do before I got into coaching. And yeah, I mean, I'm here, just that whole idea of sort of the balanced approach and to sort of like in terms of endurance and making sure kids don't get hurt, like that's kind of what I'm wanting to do.
Hi, my name is Kashi Ambrose, and I am the program coordinator and head coach for robotics here at CRI, and I'm just here to learn.
Great. You want to jump over to the far table?
All right. I'm Michaela Carr-Warner. I coach novice women here at CRI, and honestly, yes, I'm just really here to learn and just kind of be very open-minded about coaching and kind of apply what I hear today going forward as well, kind of with my own experiences and how I can better coach going forward. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Catherine Erickson. I coach at the Hill School, and I'm a new coach, so I'm just trying to absorb as much information as possible.
I'm Daria McNally. I coach at Middlesex School, but I'm also the head athletic trainer. So I'm always looking for ways to not only deal with my athletes, but other athletes through training that maybe comes from the rowing world that will help them as well.
I'm Tom Erickson. I'm also at Middlesex School with the novice girls. I'm here just for general information.
I'm Mike Harrington. I work with the varsity boys at Middlesex School. I'm mostly interested in hearing more about work that the guys can do during the winter, not on ergs. For our guys, we're not really coaching them during the winter. They're pretty much totally on their own. So I'm curious to hear about things they can do that aren't going to cause bad habits that we don't have time to fix.
Everyone except for the adults.
Came for the beer, here for the rowing. Just trying to get some fresh ideas for winter training, and been doing it for a while and need some inspiration.
I'm Tori. I coach novice girls here at CRI. Just here to learn as much as I can to help implement for the winter.
I'm Lily, and I also coach here at CRI with the Comp Boys and also for the BC Men. And I'm here just because I think it's great to learn from others and foster some really good conversation.
Sam, you want to jump to the back?
I'm Sam Clifford. I coach here at CRI for Row Boston and with the BU Women. Just here to meet people and learn new things.
My name's Alex. I'm the head coach for the Boston College Men. And I also coach here for CRI Row Boston, and just always here to hear Peter talk. He's always got something good to tell us.
Andy Sales, novice boys head coach here at CRI, and strength and conditioning and rowing are two of my main hobbies, which makes me pretty interesting. So,
Love this. Great. You want to go?
Sure, yeah. So, hello, I'm the one that's been emailing you. My name is Patrick Larkham. I'm the Director of Coaching Education here at CRI. I've been coaching here for a while. I was roommates with Bodie, coached with a number of you guys, and yeah, right now I'm actually working with the lightweight women at Radcliffe, doing some strength and conditioning. So some fun things going on there if you want to hear about that. But yeah, have some fun. I'm glad you guys came. Pumped. Oh, and everybody say hi. We're live. We don't. Oh, we have one live follower.
That's probably my mom.
As Tom will explain, we're testing some stuff out. We're gonna see what works for us all. You know. So, anyways, go.
Yeah, I think I have somebody who needs to introduce herself. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm Karen. I rode 40 years ago, and continue to row, and I'm involved with Winnipesaukee rowing in Meredith, New Hampshire. And always like to hear new things.
Theo, you want to do a quick introduction?
I'm Theo. I rode here. I rode at Cornell, and after graduating, I came here, trained for a year and a half with their performance group. Really trained here, and now I'm back in Boston, coaching the Radcliffe novice heavyweight women.
I think I know most of you guys. And I'm a fellow at the IRL, and I work with the heavyweight guys at Harvard. So Peter, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So some of you know who I am. My name is Peter Donohoe, and I'm part of the competitive men's masters rowers, and have had the great opportunity and privilege of competing in the Head of the Charles and some other masters events that we've done over the past few years. And I believe I started rowing, let's say maybe 9 or 10 years ago. And just to give you a little bit about my background and why am I speaking to you. I've got a very diverse background, so I don't come from rowing, and I'm not a rowing coach. I'm technically a strength and conditioning coach, but I've been working at Boston Ballet now for about 13 years, and at Boston Ballet I'm a functional strength trainer where I basically am working on better movement patterns, better balance in the body's movement. You know, a lot of dances are externally rotated, a lot of dances also end up with hip issues, and some of them end up with all sorts of other things. But so that was kind of my primary role here about 12, like I said, 12 or 13 years ago, working with the ballet. My background is I started in the world of dance. I was dragged kicking and screaming to dance because there was nothing else in the neighborhood. My mother was deathly afraid that I'd end up setting the house on fire unless she got me into doing something. And then after being teased because I was a dancer, as I stand here like this, I took up rugby, and to my utter dismay, I seem to have had some athletic ability in rugby, but the truth is, I learned so much from the world of dance in terms of flexibility, speed, and agility, and body awareness, like my own awareness of my movement from point A to point B. It's business because I'm so aware that there are 12, 13, 14, 25-year-olds who are still trying to figure out where their body is in space and time. So I was a rugby player out of playing rugby for about 9 years. Then I participated in track and field. I competed on the national team. I was national indoor record holder, champion at 55-meter high hurdles. I ran 110-meter high hurdles. I was an Olympic qualifier, 400-meter hurdles, 1992. Trust me, it's going to get very boring very quick. And in 1996, I didn't make the qualifying time. I had an opportunity to go to Innsbruck, Austria, where I learned to be a bobsledder. Yeah, you heard me, a bobsledder. And I competed in the 98 Olympic Games and the 2002 Olympic Games. I was in 3 World Championships, competed in the 2003 World Championships, like last at 17th place in the world, thank you. And I'm also a dad and I don't sleep a lot. So, so here I am. And what am I? Sorry, Bodie. That must have been that night coffee I had earlier today. So, here I am, and I had a chat with Patrick and with Tom because this program. I also work with the varsity men's program. And while I was originally asked to come and help them in terms of doing strength work, strength and conditioning work, when I started working with the boys, I basically said to the coaches, I am not going to load these boys for at least 2 months. At least 2 months to get them to move better. So there was an incredible lack of movement and functionality out of their hips. There was, for some reason, they kept using L3, L4, and 5 as a hinge, which is absolutely not supposed to be a hinge, by the way. So if you're out there rolling like that, you shouldn't be. Fine, we've got some great elasticity on our upper spine, but we really got to gain more awareness and knowledge about how do we create a better athlete. Whether you are a sprinter, swimmer, rower, jumper, whatever it is, we're all human beings, they're all human beings, and all those human beings need to move better. They need to move better so that they can reduce the risk of injury and then be able to take on load when the bodies are ready for it. How often has anybody here seen somebody get in under a squat rack and do this? I'm sure in some time in your lifetime you've done that, and this is one of the reasons why I just seriously cannot go to a lifetime gym and go because it drives me insane, and then there's 10 trainers on the floor. And so move better. It's not about more is better, because I think also traditionally coaches come from, well, you know what, they're doing X in this state or this college, so therefore we need to add more. Adding more is the biggest mistake that we can possibly make. We've got to improve what we've got. And every athlete is not created equally. You know, 14-year-old, 15, 17-year-old, one is 17 years of age is going to move very differently than somebody else who's 17 or 14 years of age. So, you know, I am addressing youth here because I think most of us are high school coaches, a few college coaches as well. But still, we're still human beings. Anyway, there's an incredible lack of effective and efficient movement out of these kids, and I'm, you know, thrilled, Aaron, that you're involved in this, you know, from a PT perspective. Let me see. Questions. Let's, you know, start with a few questions, and then I'll jump into the next little piece that I want to talk about. Thoughts, questions, comments, cheap shots, Irish jokes. Okay, good. Anybody? Bueller? No. So I did notice that a couple of people said that the coach is acting Boxborough, but you sound like you have a very acting Boxborough accent. Where are you from?
Sydney, Australia originally.
Sydney, Australia. That's all right. Fantastic. Forgive me for wearing a New Zealand bobsleigh too. Just anyway, as long as you're not wearing a God Save the Queen shirt in front of you. Movement. The truth is, where do we start with that? You know, fine, a lot of kids, a lot of coaches are starting to now think about the winter and winter training, and how much time do you allot to each of these pieces? And there are several ways to look at it. And some of the ways people look at it from, well, hang on, we're in an endurance sport, therefore let's address the big endurance piece, the aerobic piece. The truth is, this is a sport where you are rowing somewhere between 6 and 16 minutes. An endurance sport is somebody who's doing an event for an hour, or a marathoner, or a long distance swimmer. And though we have the, yeah, but wait, if we've got to do 90 minutes on the bike today, because you only did 60 on the rower yesterday. Exact details, because I don't remember them all, but there are pieces, and what I can probably do is assemble some of the links. National Strength and Conditioning Association has done some studies, not as many as I'd love, but thankfully. who've jumped into some of the research to take a look at some of the energy systems that need to be addressed. Here's the other problem. Too many coaches are trying to fit all energy systems into a 7-day week program. Big mistake. How am I going to get, forgive me, phosphagen glycolysis and whatever, into the system and aerobic into the system if I've only got X amount of hours and X amount of days in a week? And the truth is that more research has shown that you should ideally address 2 of those energy systems and address those for about 4 to 5 weeks, and then move on to another 2, but still keeping your hand in one of those pieces. Yes, sir.
So I'm a reader of Ed McNeely's blog.
Oh, yeah.
2 books on sculling.
Yes.
His latest thing is reactive training, and so he has you test all the energy systems.
Yeah, great.
And then find the weakest.
Yeah, sure.
And train, emphasize those.
Yeah.
But I would think, it just seems to me that everyone's always weak in the aerobic area. And you would get stuck in just those areas that forever that they're weak in.
Yeah, sure. So the truth is that's not really the truth.
Okay.
The thing is everybody's a little different, and if everybody had a little lactate test right now, they'd have different numbers. And even if we all in the room had been training for 3 months together and doing the same workout, all of our numbers would be quite different because we are built up of type 1, type 2 muscle fiber types, and how some of us handles, ATP versus somebody else, and how somebody else handles aerobic. It's too general. And I've seen some of McNeely's stuff, but that's from 2005 and 2006, which was at the time, that's some great thinking, but now there's more and more. Like, how recent is that? Did you look?
I think he came out as, I would say, 2017 actually.
Okay, so that's pretty recent. That's pretty recent. But again, like, there are more specifics, right? Because we can't just generally say aerobic, because there's many ways to look at the aerobic capacity. I can develop aerobic capacity if I've got somebody in the weights room. Hang in there. I know that that's a different system, but there are some benefits to that. So I'm not denying that there is definitely some value and some importance in addressing aerobic, but I'm not saying it disappears, but what I'm saying is that when you're looking at a program, you've got to look at all of the energy systems. You don't want to be missing something. If your goal is, I want to improve performance. Well, if I'm going to improve performance, yeah, you know what, I feel like my athletes are just weak in the endurance department. Well, endurance can be optimized if I've got better movement patterns, if I've got better neural adaptation, if I've got better strength. So if I've got better capacity to be able to do some of that work, now when I go do some of that work, I'm not hitting the red limiter. I'm right around here, 60% of max. I don't want to get too technical. I want to try to still speak English. But there are, I think traditionally, and not just rowing coaches, many coaches look at, there's black, there's white, a little shade of gray in here. Well, there's so many more colors that we want to take a look at, that we have to take a look at in terms of developing a better athlete and a better performer. And, I think I'm assuming that we as coaches, we want to try to get the best. Like of course, we are coaching, so we want to be able to produce an athlete that's going to produce some pretty darn good results out of the water. So skills are very important, and how do I hold on to those skills is I need strength. How do I hold on to better functionality? I need strength. I got to develop strength machinery or scaffolding around improved movement in order to be able to hold on to them when I'm out in the water. Andy, question?
To put a pretty broad one out there, I think for a lot of rowing coaches, high school boys love to lift. I gotta get my numbers down. So if I deadlift 350, then I'm gonna have a better 2K. What's strong enough?
Well, so that's it. It's arbitrary. So it's not specific, because the thing is, I don't necessarily need a kid who's able to deadlift, 350 pounds, but then you put them in the boat and they look like hell in the boat. Somewhere in that up into the water, I've got good functionality. I mean, trust me, I'm naming these things and I don't see any of them. I see some strong athletes who can't move properly. I see some great athletes. I see some athletes who've got great flexibility and function, and you put them on the water and then like, oh, they look like hell. Or you put them under a bar and it's like, what happened to all that great fitness? Whatever I might think is strong enough. Strong enough to be able to hold on to your skills and improvements that you're trying to apply for a 2K or a 6K, you know. I hope that helps. Yes, Tom.
I was thinking maybe a good place to start with the discussion and some of your presentation would be, you show up on the first day of practice.
Yeah, great.
And there's 20 gangly 15 or 16 girls looking back at you.
Yeah, sure.
And from that point, what do you do? How do you address that?
So that's a great question. And again, we're probably going to end up having another coaches roundtable on that one. But one of the biggest things that I noticed, certainly with some of the younger kids, and when I've had the opportunity to jump in and help out with the novice girls and with the novice boys, is coordination. There's quite an incredible lack of coordination. And I've had some kids where I've taken them out to the field, and I thought, all right, let's get them. No, it's frightening. It's frightening. It's a very simple, basic, coordinated move, says the guy who goes dancer and whatever. But in my mind, I had assumed that, all right, we can do some skips, we can do some side shuffle, backward skip, basically skip, whatever. But if I had the opportunity to work with you and we had some young, gangly, novice athletes, well, teach them to get a little bit coordinated, you know. Try to tax different parts of their brain and their body. You know, get their brain thinking about how their body is moving in space and time. You know, we talked about, I mentioned a little earlier about how their awareness of where their body is foreign to a lot of athletes. But that's where I would start. It's a way to address some of that cardiovascular, that endurance piece is, I set up 15 drills or 5 drills, take a minute of recovery, we go do them again, take a minute of recovery, we go do them again. It's a great way to tax the body's energy systems without having to compromise or fight difficult movement patterns that are potentially putting these kids at high risk. Does that help?
Definitely, yeah. That's great.
Anybody else? This is great, by the way, because it means then I'm not leading you down my path. You guys can help. Yes?
You asked what strong enough is.
Yeah.
To me, strong enough is the athletes are strong enough to hang on to their technical excellence in the last 500.
Bingo.
In other words, we're all strong, and the difference is going to be, are we technically adroit enough?
Right.
50 to go. So where is that coming from, particularly in a 16-year-old?
Yeah, that's great.
You know, because you watch it at the junior level,
yeah,
and it's all great for the first 1,000, and then all of a sudden everyone gets tired,
right?
And then bad habits creep back in. You know, they get short, the blades go up in the air, and so the trick is, can I train my athletes to remember to be technically excellent, hang on to that, and then push themselves into anaerobic depth?
Sure.
That's strong enough.
Yeah. The short answer is yes, you can.
Yeah.
But the other answer is,
that's why we're here.
Yeah, I know. So I had a conversation with Terrence Mann. Anybody know who Terrence Mann is? Terrence is he's a world-renowned middle distance coach. He trains athletes from 800 meters up to 3,000 meters. And traditionally, when distance athletes were trained, it was all about mileage. Terrence actually has kind of done a lot more of his own digging into the information and the research to show now that with these athletes that he has, and he's got about 15 women, I think 12 have made it on the US team and 10 have been at the Olympic Games. And what he did was he literally halved their volume and focused on skill development and holding on to skill. So if I'm going to teach somebody how to erg correctly for 500 meters or 1,000 meters, and then I say later, today we're going to do 6,000 meters, and at about 1,500, 2,000 meters, they're falling apart. I'm now reinforcing bad movement patterns. So why are we not teaching good skill, good movement, and when it starts to break down, stop. Recover, regroup, and begin it again. You can get so much value out of doing that high level intensity training with a little recovery. You know, don't think that you're shortchanging your aerobic here, because you're not, but you're able to hold on to those skills. Let me talk from, I used to run 400-meter hurdles, and why, I don't know, because it was probably the most horrendous event I ever did in my entire life. But the athlete that ended up winning a 400-meter hurdles race was the athlete whose form held. Because it's when I would run, that's where I got left behind. So how do coaches train for that? And how coaches train for that now is quality, 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 quality. More is not better, better is better. I hope that helps. Anybody else? Yes? Yes, as long as you practice perfect. Seriously, like, big deal. Big deal. Yeah. Yes?
In terms of like conditioning without the erg and talking about functionality, what are some analogs that you like off the erg for sort of adapting to rowing sort of athleticism?
So it's great. So I was in an NSCA coaches clinic not too long ago where I was looking at that specific thing, and I was trying to figure out, why do we use the bikes so much? Well, we use the bikes because we've got some push and pull. You know, you really kind of want to have your feet locked into a bike properly, by the way, so you can actually pull it as well as push it. So the bike would be pretty good for rowers getting in shape. Let's think outside the box. Skip drills, jump rope. You know, something that's going to challenge your cardiovascular system, wear a heart rate monitor. Like, I can throw it all sorts out. Swimming, fine. A lot of us love having athletes go and run Harvard Stadium stairs, but I don't always love beating the crap out of their legs and their calves, and then the next day we have to try to do some deadlifts. You know, running is good, but again, you don't have to go out. Guys, go run for 30 minutes. Don't get back here till I see, you know, till 6 o'clock arrives. Well, why don't we just get them out on the track? Why don't we get them to run repeat hundreds? 30-second recovery, turn around, run 100 meters. Not sprint. Run, form and technical work. You know, again, addressing some of that coordination, some of those skills, but you can get an incredible workout out of doing high quality and, you know, like good intent. You know, you can run, you can swim, you can bike. Bike is probably the one that's closest, but I'm a big fan of changing up some of the patterns. If I have an athlete and their deadlift is X, and they're like, I got to hit this number, I'm like, great, we're going to hit that number, and for 3 weeks we haven't done deadlift, and the athlete's saying, why haven't we done deadlifts? I'm like, well, we're going to do deadlifts next week. And we go do deadlift next week, and it's gone up 15%. Like, well, what do? We haven't been doing deadlifts. I said, exactly. The fact is, if a marathoner wants to be a better marathoner, they don't just keep going out running marathons. They're running shorter distance stuff with better quality. You know, anyway, there's many ways to skin the cat, and I'm a fan of not beating the crap out of the athletes. Yes?
So we're all dealing with a very similar demographic in that they live similar lifestyles and that they're students a lot of times. So what they do before arriving to practice is very similar. Yes. What do you see as the biggest functional limitation in students or kids that are sitting down all day? And then what would you say is a corrective exercise from there?
Okay, great. So if you think about what an athlete is, what some of these athletes and students are doing all day, it's this. Well, the truth is, it's actually this. Yeah. So what's shorten up hip flexors? Whatever happened gym at school, by the way, do schools just not do gym anymore? That's criminal. But yeah, so one of the things that I address when I'm working with an athlete is I'm a big fan of getting on the roller. The roller is one heck of a way to be able to just kind of flush through some of that tissue, get some fluidity throughout their tissue, ligament, tendon, muscle. It's a great preparation tool. And in fact,
Like you do that before?
Before, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. and more research has shown that it is actually more valuable. It was brought on the market as a self-myofascial releasing tool, but it's not really releasing myofascial because there's muscle and fascia. If I'm rolling it, I'm not separating it. But rolling will create enough squishiness in there that you can get a little bit more function. So I'm a big fan of rolling. I tell every kid that I work with, make sure you have a lacrosse ball and a roller. We start out with a lacrosse ball. We pin that lacrosse ball right in their glutes. Because again, if I'm sitting all day, sitting on my poor old glutes, or I've been in this position, well, I haven't really been using them to their most effective and efficient way. So we use the ball, the lacrosse ball, to break up some stickiness, adhesions in the tissue, create a little bit more freedom, and at the same time that we're breaking things up, we're stirring things up. We're activating those glutes. So I'm a fan of the lacrosse ball, the roller, and then I start out pretty much with T-spine mobility. Better function through mid-back, thoracic mobility. Cat-cow, stretch. Again, better movement out of the spine. So if I can wake up the spine out of this position, now I've got a better chance to find more hip movement. Hip flexors, hip flexors, hip flexors, hip flexors. I cannot stress how important they are. If they get shortened, and then some of these kids are jumping in the car and dropped off here, and some of them have sat in the car for 30 minutes, what's happened is the body has learned shortened hip flexors. Shortened hip flexors are pulling my hips down. This is a big old thick heavy muscle in my quad, and if they're pulling down my hip flexors, well, guess what? They're also pulling my psoas, and my psoas has some insertional points here, which is also making me overload my back. Yes?
Doesn't rowing further aggravate that, being in the seated position?
Bingo. That's why you got me up here. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, it does, unfortunately. So, movement. It might only take us 20 or 30 minutes to be able to really get better movement patterns in the body and wake things up so that they can function, and then be a bit more prepared before you start rowing. Yes, I'm even guilty of this, showing up here at 10 to 5 in the morning, and then haven't gotten out of the car with my coffee in my hand, like, great, I'm in a boat, I'm in an 8, and we're doing some hard pieces. It's the worst, absolutely the worst. Yes, sorry.
Just a thought on the rolling and the students who are sitting down all day. One thing that I try to do with my guys, and I've tried to do with my students in class also, is tell them to bring a lacrosse ball with them to class. So that they're not just sitting in front of their math teacher kind of slumping down. They're sitting out there, that ball under their glute. They can actually do a lot of that loosening up during the class day, so that then they don't have to do as much of it when they get to practice.
Sure. I'm a fan. If they... Say again?
I was going to ask about that. It seemed to me logical if you've got them with a lacrosse ball, take it to class. I mean, I could see a lot of mischief with that too, but...
Don't try that in public school.
Seriously.
Wouldn't it be valuable? I mean, the other thing I've seen too is if you put 2 lacrosse balls in a sock, then you can particularly if you've had piriformis problems. It really loses.
Well, so I'm a fan of the lacrosse ball because it's cheap and easy to buy, and you can have one in your bag, you have one in your car, you have one in your bike, you have one in your room, you have one at your gym, and so I like it. The ball, the peanut, I think they call it, where it looks like there's 2 balls attached in the middle. That's wonderful. The thing is, just because you roll in class doesn't mean great. You've checked that off the list before practice. You still want to use it in practice, because when you sit on the lacrosse ball, you actually want to move your body around in several directions to really be able to dig right in there. But yes, I tell every single one of my students, and it doesn't always happen, but I do tell every single one of my students, imagine a carpenter showing up at your house and it's like, yeah, do you have a hammer I could borrow? Do you have nails I could borrow? Do you have a saw? Like, these are your tools. This is the tools of your sport. It might not have been when we were students, but a lacrosse ball and a roller, and actually now I'm starting to tell people, get a little mini band, nothing like 5 steps to the right and 5 steps to the left to get a little bit more activation. When people say, oh, my glutes are not activated, well, you know what, if you're able to stand up out of a chair, your glutes are activated. but you want to be able to really turn those suckers on. We know that intimately, right? All these things that we did over the years, really valuable. Yes?
Were you saying on like the differences, like hip flexors are obviously very utilized in rowing. They're not just like shortened and tight all the time because of rowing, but I feel like you rely on them heavily. Like, where do you stand on like strengthening versus stretching that area?
Well, quad and core strengthening is what we need. What's happening in between quad and core are my hip flexors. So technically I'm trying to just keep them free so that they can function. The other piece that's missing here are adductors. So if I'm looking at the chain throughout here, I've got very big muscles with my quads. The second largest group of muscles are my adductors. And then the third largest in terms of my rowing muscles are my hamstrings. So the adductors end up getting neglected because we're just looking in this linear plane. And funny thing is, I was noticing some rowers having some hip issues, and I'm thinking, flexibility, and I was thinking, all right, adductor longest test, horrible. And it made no sense because adductors are still involved in flexion and extension. So that's also a very important part of the chain. There's a reason why things start to show up as pain, disruption, difficulty, tightness. It's because they're doing more work than they really need to. So that's why it's critical that we really look at the overall athlete and all of the systems to help them move better, so that we're not just, killing those poor old hip flexors and QLs. So, anybody? Yes, Theo.
Do you see any harm in rowing or any risks in rowing coaches trying to coach very body specific? Think about how you're moving movements with things like skipping, for example, because I remember I was coaching high schoolers while I was training with you, and there were times when we were doing weights and I was like, all right, we're going to skip for warm-ups, because I know Peter does that and I'll get you thinking about how you're moving your body, and it was just like, I know you're all skipping wrong, and that's as much as I can say about it, because I don't know how to tell you to skip better. I can tell you what I'm looking for if you were practicing rowing better, but I kind of quit that, and I was like, I'm going to keep the body specific movement stuff to the rowing stroke, because I know what I'm looking for.
So awesome. And just before you came in the room, I think, or maybe you were here when I talked about how it's a really good idea for us to change up what their brain is processing, and for young athletes to really figure out where their bodies are. Because, while this offers direction back and forth with all sorts of stuff going on, we want to try to get the brain working so that we've developed or we're training a better athlete overall, so we can help reduce the risk of injury. But to address specifically your question, there is nothing that I have an opinion about something, and my opinion is, if you are a coach, go lunch and having not done a damn thing in 15 years, get out there and practice it. All right, let's figure YouTube. Is that how I skip? All right, let me try that. So I really think it's very, 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 very valuable for coaches to learn how to do some of these things. And by the way, learn how to do some stuff. And I'm happy to do some of that. Learn how to do some good T-suits without having to lie on the ground. You can stretch out your glutes just from the chair that you're in. Huge fan of having coaches get out there and learn how to do these things. And I won't teach somebody how to do something if I don't know how to do it myself. Anybody else? Yes?
So I see a lot of, especially young female rowers who have, like you're saying, no body awareness, and it's interesting to have them do these dynamic movements and have them have no coordination. And I totally believe what you're saying, have a move and you'll realize that just the rowing stroke is not enough to actually train them with that. But so sitting all day, obviously they're having those glutes be kind of almost in a lengthened position, so they're getting all knotted up. But how do you deal with those athletes that are, especially those young girls who don't even know what their glutes are, how to find them, and how to activate them? Because that is awful. And I remember like as a young athlete myself, I don't think I heard a coach say like, "Oh, use your glutes," until I was way far gone in my career. So how do you, as a coach and then kind of as a strength coach, help those young loosey-goosey athletes find muscle groups that they've never actually found?
And that's a lot of the work that I do here. And I often say that to the coaches. My job is to help your job, so that when you do get an athlete out of the water and you're asking them to do ABC, that they've now gotten a little bit more verbiage or sense or connection with what are these things. And so I make a point of trying to teach people what are we doing here. And you know, I'll cue them in all sorts of ways. I'll demonstrate. I'll have them try new ways of doing things so that they can feel that. And if I work with a group of 10 or 12 athletes, that's easy. If I work with 40 athletes out on the floor, that's really hard. I can certainly do the mobility and movement, certainly mobility and core stuff, but to specifically address, you know, well, how do I find my glutes? That's a tricky one. Language around biomechanics and how body moves is really important, and I know you know how that. Yes?
Something that I've done for like finding your glutes, and I feel like it's very easy to translate to rowing, is like a lot of times because they don't know how to fully activate their glutes, their knees are caving in and stuff like that. So I don't even remember where I learned it, but like tell them to imagine they're standing on like a piece of newspaper and they're trying to rip that newspaper apart without moving their feet, and that act of trying to like spread their feet without actually moving them helps them kind of bring their knees out a little bit and their glutes fire a little bit more, so that then when they go into that squat or when they're then sitting on the erg or anything like that, they're actually thinking about where their knees should be tracking, which is helping their glutes continue to fire. And
for 6 weeks every year I work with lacrosse, high school lacrosse girls and soccer girls, specifically to work on valgus and decreasing the risk of ACL injuries, because changes occur in girls, and then that whole Q angle changes from hip towards the knee, so then there's more load dropping internally. I do like that movement, and I've used that. Imagine you're spreading rice paper apart under your feet, under the soles of your feet. But dealing with girls of a certain age, again, better awareness, balance, stability. It's amazing how much you can get out of just doing something like that. Try have somebody do that for 30 seconds. No, honestly. But it should. But when we step back for a second,
Study that came out last week that said that fine motor skills in children have been declining, and in the last 5 years they've declined at an alarming rate. And so the study's put out by occupational therapists and pediatricians and a number of other people. But the occupational therapist said it starts basically at birth. Children are put on their back, learn to push themselves up, because the fine motor skills start with the gross motor activities as kids. They're put into child seats. So I remember we didn't have child seats, and you're wobbling this way and that way. So they're just stuck in this position. So they're not learning to balance themselves in a lateral fashion. And then they're put in these walk rings so they can walk motor functions, and they're just going right to walking and skipping all these stages.
It's shocking.
These little movements are actually, along the way, they develop their fine motor movements, and so they're put at a disadvantage.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess my question for you, having them roll and do some basic.
Listen, I'm a fan of that. Just the same reason why I'm a fan of pulling them out in the field and having them learn how to skip. Backward skip, side shuffle, stand single leg, stabilize. Anything that's just going to get them to change movement pattern. Because again, if a child's going to go from a baby seat into a chair at school onto an erg, there's limitations in that. So we want to expand the limitations, and also all of us as coaches now have we've got a duty and a responsibility then to try to be able to help some of these kids who've not had, but certainly some of the kids who've not learned how to do some skip drills, balance drills, very
knowing what to say to them, and even just looking at them and looking at the kids and being able to give them a cue that let's not lean forward, keep your eyes up, and giving them
Sure.
body function cues to help them to balance. You don't have to necessarily dissect the way they're skipping, but you can pick up a piece of what they're doing and give them something to focus on to adjust the way that they're skipping that may correct how they're doing that skip motion.
Yeah. Something as simple as flipping your foot.
Yeah.
That's a
Or
first step
what's
to,
their posture? Are they
Yep.
bending forward? I mean, I have a soccer team. The coach is standing there running a drill, and he has them run backwards. Well, the whole team leans forward and runs backwards. When you play soccer, looking at the ground, when you're running backwards, right? Your head's up, your chest is up, you're looking up. So change your body function. So that
you can
move
also
properly.
over cue. Like you can add a lot of things like that to a young developing athlete, and at the same time kind of give them
I
overload.
always say one. Pick one.
Yeah, perfect.
Just pick
That's
one.
great. Erin, you had a question?
Yeah, it was more just a statement. I think that rowing is so
Yes.
forward, backward all the time, and so few athletes, especially when you think about rowers, especially those young rowers that come onto a novice team, it's often, sadly, because these rowers didn't super excel at other sports. They weren't awesome soccer players, they weren't awesome basketball players.
Amen.
And rowers come to rowing because they typically weren't kind of coordinated in those other planes
Sure.
to start with, and then you're sitting them down and saying, okay, move back and forth,
Sure.
which is crazy. And I think one of the interesting takeaways from kind of going into winter training is you row in the fall, and then it's kind of expected, you're going to row in the winter, you're going to winter train, you're going to be on the erg, and then you go into the spring, and then, but you probably should row over the summer too. And so these athletes are still front back all the time and never get that other planes of movement. So
Have you ever
that's
spoken
so
to different sports, and they've said 6 months later, oh my God, this guy's such a gifted rower.
Yeah.
No, that's a more diverse athlete. That's a more well-rounded athlete. So, yes, we find or we observe athletes that might not have necessarily excelled in something else, and then some of this then kind of goes back to some of the parents, which is okay, so Johnny's pretty good at school, but is okay at school, but what's going to help open the door to get into a really good school? It's like, well, let's get you into rowing. It's a very popular sport. Sorry to say that you can go out loud. Anybody else? Yes?
I was just thinking about getting people to slow down when you were saying run it, not sprint it. That really stuck with me because being an athlete myself, I felt like I'm so used to going, and which is how I got injured off of after college because I didn't have programming and I was just going all the time. And so thinking about how to get the kids to take a step back and not be competitive and just I don't know if there's I don't know if that's
So maybe that's the culture.
Yeah,
That could be the
Rowers
culture.
like to redline it.
What's that?
Rowers like to redline it.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem because they like to redline it, and then who's trying to manage all those injuries associated with it? I have an MD now. I have an MD that works with me, and she's a Boston Children's Hospital sports medicine doctor. And she and I spoke about what can we do to help save these kids from bad programming. And so she works with me a couple of days a week, and it's so great because the second somebody look, and I've had somebody here who's had the same kind of thing hanging around for about 3 weeks, and time for an MRI. And I think, like you said, too often, I can grin and bear it, we got 6 500s today, or a 6K test tomorrow, I'm just going to keep pushing through. The worst thing in the world, but that's unfortunately, there's some sports that have
novice athletes, especially, they don't know when are they just learning a new muscle, that's what they're feeling, or is it an injury? I feel at least with my novice girls, I spent a lot of the season where the second they said something bothered, I'm okay, hop off. And now we're getting to a point where it's I feel they're not, I don't want to push them if it's an actual injury.
Yes.
But I don't want them to just give up because it's hard. And I feel it's trying to find that how do you teach them to understand it? Because I've tried to see getting them to describe is it a sharp shooting pain? Is it a fatigue, a soreness? But how do you teach that to a 14-year-old girl who doesn't really even know what her limbs are?
Totally got it. And that can happen with the 18-year-old boy and the 19-year-old boy as well. And unfortunately, that comes with time because I had a boy and he said, is that supposed to hurt my blah? I'm like, what does hurt mean? Is it a sharp pain? Is it a dull ache? Do you feel it? Like, so there are ways that we need to dissect that down a little bit, because they might think, you said you've got a pain, I'm doing the same thing, I must have the same thing, I must have a disc issue, or whatever that is. So that's really hard, it's really challenging, because again, they're not understanding, is this discomfort really important? Is that just aching? But is the aching in both legs? Is the aching on both sides of your spine? Is it just fatigue? And that's kind of where you have to honestly, like, keep digging.
I was gonna say, like, I try to use a lot of specific words with my kids, like what you said, like asking specifics about the injury, sharp shooting pain versus dull pain. But the most helpful thing for me recently, I've given up on rowing as an athlete and I switched to rugby.
Nice.
And something that my partner taught me, who is a rugby player also and also a hockey player, is that she grew up with her coach asking, "Are you hurt or are you injured?" And it had never really occurred to me the difference before, but it's something that I play with my kids. Like, are you hurt and are you sore, or do you think you might be injured? And like, that's where we draw the line. I also use like a 0 to 10 scale, and like, if you hit a 6, especially if it's a chronic thing, then like you're done. Bye. Like, that's it. I will stop the whole row for you. And those are things that help me, like hurt, injured, and then like, especially for the kids who have chronic things coming up, whether that's in the boat or on the land, like that's our cue, without like embarrassing them in front of everyone else or making them feel guilty for making the whole boat turn around, is like they just were like 6, 7,
I actually,
and I'm like, cool.
I actually think it would be very valuable to have, you know, a PT who's trained to kind of dig in there a little bit more on that. And I also feel like while many of us coaches are great coaches for teaching the skill of rowing, when it comes to some of these other pieces, some of us are just not as strong. And it's really helpful. Like, I'm a big fan of always learning. And the fact that I have an MD that works with me, I'm like, I love this, because now I can ask her some of the questions that I thought, well, I've done it this way, and I know why. Can you tell me? So it's you know, it's great. But I also feel too that as rowing coaches, having an expert around and just have them kind of dig in and listen to what they're saying is very, very helpful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, John.
It's a little bit of a different group that I work with, but when they come in here, they're all have achieved a lot. They're here for a selection camp for National Team Boat C. And one of the first things we do is try to manage expectations.
Great.
And what we stress right at the very beginning is recovery makes you stronger. And we always ask every day, and I'm a helicopter parent of these athletes, but I say, anyone who hurts today, how do you hurt? So everything that I've heard here is exactly what we ask.
Great.
And they do know the difference between an injury and just being sore from a good workout.
Yeah.
And there have been several conspicuous examples of people who wouldn't listen. They were so overly motivated.
Yeah.
They're no longer rowing. So it's very important to establish at the beginning, there's nothing wrong with taking a day off because you're coming back, and I know it from my own workouts. And I was wiped today because I started my weight training yesterday. So I didn't do anything today. I'll be back tomorrow. So it's sort of setting the stage that it's all right. This is not go to your drop and then do some more.
And the thing is too, John, you know, like it's, you've probably done it many different ways, and you're at a point in your life now where you think, you know what, a day off is not going to hurt me. It's actually going to help me. So
no, I mean, it's medically proven.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just my wisdom.
No.
That's
good. Yeah.
I think a lot, like especially with kids, like with adults, it's a little bit different because they're adults and they can make their own decisions. But like with kids, you will like tread into tricky water sometimes if you're the one that's making the decision. Necessarily, if they voice to you that they are unsure whether or not they can continue, it like gets tricky. So like you have to be a little careful with that. But I think the big thing is to try to remove emotion from you one way or another. So on the one end of the spectrum, like you're really insistent this workout has to get done. So like, you know, are you really hurt or are you just like a little sore, this and that? But on the other side, of that emotional spectrum, a lot of them, especially if you work with younger kids, and then especially if they are athletes before, they might have never gotten hurt in their life before. So like, don't panic as a coach too much if the kid's freaking out. Like, it probably could be something small. Like with like novice boys, sometimes like we've got a couple of my coaches that coached me here. Like, they lightly pulled something, but they like I popped my back, lightly straight them up. But, like, they've never gotten hurt in their life because they've never been active before. And, you know, they've been, like, it doesn't happen playing Fortnite, so this is like a new thing. So you like either way, like, don't think that you necessarily know best, but at the same time, if they're freaking out, like, don't freak out either. Like, they probably gonna be all right.
That's great. That's awesome, and thank you. Anybody? This is actually great. This is so great. Thank you for jumping in, guys. Yes.
I coached track for quite a long time.
Nice.
One of the biggest complaints from young boys, which I never believed until I started to read about it, was growing pains.
Oh yeah, that's a big deal.
Which is a huge reality.
Oh yeah.
And I think part of learning to coach them is to say, everything you're feeling is normal. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. But it is a real
But you still have to modify.
pain.
No, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Their muscles are growing faster than their bones can
Yeah.
stand.
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate thing. So I think a lot of it is psychological as well as physical to
Yeah.
understand.
It's a big deal. It's very important.
Pushed, but they also need to be listened to.
Oh, I agree. Well, I've been very fortunate, given the work that I do at Boston Ballet, we do a training, all the ballet teachers do a training on growth, you know, how kids are going through certain changes. And while I might have a kid that's got incredible flexibility in their hamstrings, etc., in May and June, and then they come back in September, October, and that's all changed. But now they're starting to talk like this. So they're on there, you know, and then that's when you don't press. What you want to do now is, now we have to step back a little bit and kind of let nature navigate them, and we kind of navigate inside of that and what they're feeling and not feeling. But that's important. And again, though, back to my earlier point, many coaches are not trained to deal with that. Like, oh, what am I supposed to do here? Do I keep pushing? Do I back it off? Do I put, you know, do we say rest and ice? So very important. So again, I feel like there are many coaches who are really good at what they do, coaching, you know, coaching the skill of the sport, but all the other pieces that help to support that, again, just not as strong as I wish they were. Yes, and then you.
The important thing about that too is that not only are you saying, okay, like let's say their bones are growing, so their muscles are getting shorter, but their body's growing, and so now their whole brain is saying, okay, like now I just grew, like how do I move my body now that I just added this?
Over. Yeah.
They might not realize it as an athlete,
Yes.
and you might not realize it as a coach unless you kind of put the two and two together and say like, okay, they've started to maybe move a little less coordinated, so I think that's something to be really aware of. I mean, that's like valuable information if your athletes are telling you, hey, I'm having these growing pains. You're like, okay, not only are your muscles now not growing as fast, but like your body.
Like your coordination. Question.
And one of the things I think as particularly with boys at that high school age, as they shift from the fall season into the winter season, is spending those first couple weeks, don't jump on that or don't do this, but spending those first couple weeks non-weighted body movements.
Yeah,
so that you're spending that time, and it gives the kid who's been sitting in a boat and didn't know that he grew 3 inches, doesn't know that his toes are actually over here and not over here, but giving them the opportunity to do it. So it's non-weighted body movements that they're doing, and whether it's actually teaching them how to do a hip thrust or to do the squat without a bar, without anything, but going through those motions prior to ever loading them up, prior to ever throwing them on earth, and taking the time in those first couple weeks that you get them in the winter of saying, okay, we're coming off the fall season, now this is our sort of active rest, but we're going to do body movement and help them to understand where they are in space, but also to give you as a coach an opportunity to look at players to be my rowers, because they have developed their adductors, they've developed their legs in a way that they can, versus the volleyball girl who knows how to jump and has a shoulder that's swinging in all directions, you know, but can't do anything else. You know, but it's a chance to put them all together and then design your workouts based on what you've got as a group. And maybe you split them into groups and this group's doing one thing, this group's doing another, and you're not having everybody do the same thing.
Well, back to my very first point, which is be able to move the body effectively and efficiently before you start loading it up. Andy, did you have a question? No. Anybody else?
I'd just say it's
Yes.
sort of a challenge and a curse. If you look at your athlete who comes in at age 14,
yes,
it's a skinny little person, and
I'm here to row.
and then 4 years later,
Hey, coach.
how you doing? So we have that in addition to just the technical and physical part, they're literally going from these sprites to, and this for the women as well, the girls as well. I remember well an athlete, she's on a full ride uphill. Her freshman year, she was as skinny as a bar, and by the time she graduated as a senior, she fully articulated as much as an 18-year-old woman could.
I give you coaches so much credit for what you have to navigate, because you're not only trying to teach the skill of rowing and now try to create a more flexible, more fluid and stronger and more effective and better cardiovascularly trained athlete, but now you're going to navigate that. I mean, boy, wouldn't it be awesome to be a college coach and have the athletes like, I'm here, coach. All right. So honest to God, I give you guys a lot of credit. You have got your work cut out for you to try to navigate that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Andy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to tag off here. So the puberty talk was coming up with all the growth thing. On the side note with that, if you coach high school boys and you have like a baby-faced kid and all of a sudden he starts getting pretty bad acne, he's going to go a lot faster in like 2 months.
Right, we're going to poke that.
Massive dose of testosterone pays the price, but he's going to move up those.
Any other thoughts, questions? How we doing with this? Don't love it. Don't love it at all. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. My daughter's a swimmer, and she is, swim. That's it. She's at Georgetown, and she's had some good success. But as her dad, I had to kind of like let her navigate things. But she did taekwondo. She played soccer. She hated soccer, unfortunately, but she played it. She did a little track. So she had lots of different things before she jumped into swimming. But even in the off season, she was still out running up and down hills, playing with her friends. And but now she's in this sport. But she's just turned 20 years of age, and she's 5'9", and But don't love it.
So as rowing coaches, should people be encouraging their kids to do a different sport?
Well, sport, do I change and do a different sport and then try to become, that dimension in that particular sport and skilled in that sport? Or do I take the sport that we're doing and just add variations to it to contribute to its overall, efficiency, effectiveness, safety, because I'm Irish. If I was a rowing coach, I would definitely change things up so that for the first 4 weeks we're not even on an erg. That's certainly what I would think of that. Yeah. And
I get to it, Marilyn, the specialization thing for rowers is something that I have a pretty strong opinion on, and that I rowed 4 seasons a year from like 7th grade through all the way through college, and for whatever one sample size is worth, I never got hurt.
Well, you're a freak of nature.
Yeah, clearly a genetics lottery winner here. No, but so the thing is though, if the kid, for middle schoolers, it's probably not the best, but I personally think if you're high schoolers, if this is the first thing that they've really fallen in love with and they want to row 4 seasons a year, if you're worried they're going to get hurt, your training program's bad. If that kid likes rowing and wants to row 4 seasons a year, that should be okay. In my opinion.
I know. Listen, I think it's a very, very valid opinion, honest to God, Andy. Because, but then athletes are made up differently, right? So somebody might have the ability to be able to take on that load and manage it and survive it beautifully, and then some may just be right on the edge. And like I said, just again referencing my daughter, She had great success as a 14-year-old up to 18 years old. Had great success. And, you know, people say, wow, your daughter hasn't gotten injured. I'm like,
Sure.
and sure as heck, she's starting to get a little shoulder impingement. And then thankfully over the summer, we were able to do a bit of work to take some of that load out of the shoulder. But the truth is, you know, again, not only are you dealing with growth changes, but now you're dealing with the build of an athlete versus the build with somebody else and the build with somebody else. And I was fortunate that I got thrown into all sorts of different things, which meant that people are like, well, how come you're good at that stuff? I'm like, I don't know, but maybe it had a lot to do with the fact that I had all sorts of diversity even before I started tracking, even before I started rowing. So, but you're one of the lucky ones, Andy.
Well, sure, and not to take away from the efforts that you had, but like you had a lot of success at high levels in a few different sports, but like you were in the Olympics. Like you're genetically clearly had
a freak of nature.
Some level of gift that went into it.
Yeah,
you know, for some of our kids, like they're really bad at doing almost everything. So like if rowing's the thing that they like, then you know they.
Time to take up the piano on and up.
They're gonna get hurt walking down the street, like.
Sure.
Sure.
Different human beings. Oh, do you have a question?
No, I to build up on a little bit of what Andy's saying and what Marilyn said, like, so she said, like, you know, do you believe that kids should, you know, sort of like specialize in a sport?
Yeah.
And I guess that depends on what you define as a kid, right? And we're all somewhat familiar with the LTAD, which is long-term athletic development from Canadians and from like, right, and we have that information too, but then there's like the nuance, like every person is like an individual case, right?
Absolutely.
But you're trying to field a team of people who are young, growing, all different sort of like mental maturity, focus levels for sure. Like, I do think that rowing is a space that, you know, that is a place where if you didn't find your home, I didn't find my home in any of the other sports I did.
Yeah.
And you know, you find your home in it, and it just attracts you somehow. And in some ways, Andy's right. Like, if someone had told me, like, oh, listen, you can't ride your bike in the next 6 weeks because, like, it's not good for you, I'd have been like, yeah, see you later.
No, seriously, I know.
So some of that, you know what I mean? Like,
anyway. The back and forth, so like everyone, you know, this we should all skull like very early on because there's symmetry and that's what the Europeans do. Yeah. You know how much European kids start training when they're 12 years old? They're wildly specialized in rowing from like a young age. So it's like, if they're having fun.
You know what? Born and raised in Ireland, I certainly had to, I know this is going to go on like, schools in Europe still have recess. Like, kids are still swinging out of a swing or jumping off a slide.
Kids over here hurt themselves more often because they're just bored of them and they do crazy things and the ground's made out of rubber. They think they're not going to get hurt. Yes, they get hurt worse. Whereas in Germany, no problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, you and then John, you're next, and then somebody else. Go ahead.
I did my doctoral thesis actually on youth sports specialization.
Right.
It was in soccer players.
Nice.
So I just had to put my little thing in there. But what we found in our study, again, it was just in soccer players. My goal is to do a study on this in rowers. Stay tuned. But what we looked at was jump landing and ACL risk factors.
Right.
And actually kids who played one sport had way more of those risk factors for ACL tears than kids who played two sports. And that was like ages 8 to 13. So again, soccer, but like you think about soccer, which is multi-plane, moving in multiple directions, not let me just move in a saddle plane all day.
Right.
So.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. John.
I guess I've been fortunate in that I'm not dealing with developing athletes. These are elite athletes.
Right.
And their background almost universally is diverse. And the comment that I would make is at the highest levels, great athletes make great rowers.
Right.
If they just specialized, deal with burnout and RSI issues, and I think you've addressed a bit.
Absolutely.
So it's, you know, the thing is, Andy, I agree with you. If somebody has no other areas, but some of these kids, even the VI athletes, it's astounding how many different sports they achieve greatness.
Yeah.
So, interesting group.
Absolutely.
I think like something that has helped me a little bit with my athletes is we had them do a lot of reflecting on their fall season as a freshman, and they're a novice. So we sat down as a group and we watched like we found a nice video from Stanford that like basically just makes you like think of like how you feel as a human.
Yeah, that's great.
And it shows a lot of different sports and athletics, and then after that we had them sit there and like really think about like who were they when they started rowing, who are they now, where do they want to be in the spring, like what are their goals.
Yeah.
And then we set up times to meet with them, and a lot of them when they were reflecting talked about how they'd tried all these other sports, and they're novices, so this is their first time trying rowing for the most part, and they never found a home or a sport that they really excelled in. They never knew how to work hard, and now they're finding that. And then we are having the kids who are like, I'm loving rowing, I'm super excited for this winter because I'm going to go do swimming, but like what else can I do so that I'm ready for spring when I come back?
Sure.
So I think you get, if you touch, like if you have that chance to really talk to your athletes, like especially on the novice side when they're just learning from rowing, you can have the opportunity to really like talk to them and find out like, is this finally the sport? They've tried 7 others and none of them did they find friends or feel like they're good at something. Because if that's the case, like you don't want to turn them away from it, but I feel like you need to keep in mind like, okay, so the athletes we're going to see this winter are primarily rowing only athletes, otherwise they'd be participating in a winter sport. So what can you do as a coach to train them so that they're not getting those overuse injuries and you're still like introducing other types of training that you might get from participating in other sports without actually pushing those kids to do another sport that they're not going to be good at and they're not going to enjoy. So I feel like you can kind of give them the ability to focus in on one sport, but still give them the aspects of participating in other sports without them feeling like they have to go and be good at basketball or go and be good at something else.
It's like an investment. Diversify, diversify, diversify. So if you're trying to look for good performance, you've got to diversify. You know, you've got to try different things, not try, but be methodical and plan out different skill sets that you want to have them train and work in. So you're not only doing physiological, but you're doing cognitive, you're involved with neuromuscular, you're involved with stability, agility, better functional movement, better coordination, like really important skills as an athlete. Like, because at the end of the day, they're athletes who are doing rowing versus rowing and trying to navigate, well, where am I as an athlete? And what about all these other athletic skills that I might not have developed? So, yeah, really, really great. Anybody, anything else? Anyone?
Just as an athletic trainer, all the studies are out there that singular athlete too young, the injury rates are astronomical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of these long-term athlete development programs have times where it is not about that sport. There are multiple phases within the training that they're doing throughout the year that takes them away from that sport that focuses on something else.
Yes.
And so it takes them out of it. So, you know, when you look at something like a soccer player or a lacrosse player these days, where it is singly focused on that sport and only that sport, they don't ever have a time out from that.
Right.
And unfortunately, I feel like some of the rowing is moving in that direction, where we're not taking that downtime. We're not saying, okay, you know, you're out of season right now, you're taking 3 weeks off. And a lot of your collegiate programs, if you look at your collegiate programs, it's like there's a mandatory downtime. There's a mandatory downtime that had to be written in because coaches were doing too much with these kids. And
NCAA rules
says you have to have a downtime. And I feel like if we're running a program that's a year-round 4-season program, we've got to find ways that as those programs end, those sessions end, to force the downtime. Not as like forcing them into another sport, but say to them, go ride your bike, go climb a tree, go play, go do something with your friends, go do something else, because they're not doing those things. Like the number of kids that we get in as freshmen in our school, you're required to play a sport.
Yeah.
Well, okay, great. Well, I've got kids who go, I'm going to play third soccer, and they literally can't run. They've never gotten out of a chair, out of the car, and sat at a chess set or at a book, and now they're asked to run a sport, and I have to run remedial running because they don't even know how to go from point A to point B.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir here.
Right,
Absolutely.
but-
I mean, even Theo was talking about the skipping, like, oh crap, I can't.
But I think some of the
skip.
4-season programs need to build more downtime into their programs.
Sure.
Not just for the kids, but for coaches as a breather to say, okay, I now need time to reflect on what happened this last season. What's my goal as a coach moving into the next session? And what am I going to do? And I can't do that if the fall season ended yesterday and I'm going to start my winter season on Friday.
No, I agree.
I can give you a personal example. My son played Division I hockey at the University of Vermont.
Right.
And we started when he was 3. We went through all that mumbo jumbo. And I can tell you at least 50, if not 60% of the guys didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
They were done. They were fed up. They've been skating since, and skating 365 were like, when do we get out of here? When does graduation come? The other 50% loved it, and 5% are playing in the NHL.
Yeah, right.
But when people want something different, we're lucky at Berwick, a lot of kids swim. We don't get the snow like we used to, otherwise we have them on cross-patch skis.
Sure.
You know, we have them up in the woods running around like crazy.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, I mean, Harry Parker always said that whether there was open water in January or not, we wouldn't row.
Right.
You know, we're just,
Smart.
guys,
Right.
let's do something different.
We're
And
athletes.
I
Still
think that's
athletes,
really,
yes.
you know, and they get to junior year and they disappear.
They're like done.
I've had it, I just,
Sure.
you know, so.
So true.
I see it, but, you know, I think the Europeans somehow navigate through that differently than we do.
They
Not
work
all of
out
them.
in college.
Not all of them.
Oh, when they're here, they,
Yeah, when they come here, right.
Right.
Thoughts
Yes.
on yoga?
Thoughts on yoga? Do you really want my thoughts on it?
Yes, absolutely.
You're delving into a very interesting territory. And I,
What's your 2K, Peter?
6:38. Woo! At 50 years of age. Yoga. Okay. If somebody said, Pete, you should play more golf because it's going to improve your spinal mobility, I'd say, really? So when people participate in yoga, and again, please don't quote me and throw me under the bus if you're yogis in here. If somebody's a yoga teacher, I'm going to be beaten in the parking lot. So forgive me. All right, I am looking at you. Are you a yoga teacher?
God, no. I can touch my toes and I'm
God for that.
Yeah.
So I've done yoga and I've done all sorts of yoga, and there's a discipline to it. And yoga is like its own sport. Yoga is a meditative practice that has become a thing to do to help me improve flexibility. And while it has aspects of it that can improve flexibility, you notice I'm being very careful here with my language. While it has some aspects that can help, it is not the be-all and end-all. And some people rely on it like it is religion, and that's going to help with this, and that's going to help with that. Truth is, there's probably 4 or 5 movements there that could help you if you did them in the gym before you started lifting, or before you got on the earth. So, and again, I will only give you my opinion because I've done yoga, I've done CrossFit, I'm a certified Pilates teacher. Like, I've done them all because I'm not going to give you my opinion if I've not actually participated in them. But if I participate in them, and I know that a yoga teacher is speaking without any science or biomechanics behind why somebody should be putting themselves in a particular position, then I'm sorry, I got no time for that. Are you happy you asked?
I still don't know if I understand the answer, but.
The answer is no.
What about like the mindfulness?
But what about?
What about the mindfulness
that was
aspect
coming.
of it, or like?
Brilliant.
Because I feel like for me, like yoga is more about that than
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
stretching.
If you're going to use yoga as a tool to help increase flexibility, don't do it. If you want to use yoga, or yoga is something that helps you just kind of feel a little bit more centered and organized in your own thoughts and emotions, I think that's brilliant. And again, that's what it started out being. It is a meditative practice. It is meditation that's become now a sport.
Well,
So, yes, I'm a fan.
But, so I think of also isometric strength. I mean, a kid holding a warrior two in a good warrior two position is going to scream bloody murder. But
You don't want to go there with me. You do not want to go there with me.
okay, well, I'm asking. I have not done yoga with the kid because
Oh, that's even worse. Hot yoga?
No, I haven't done yoga with them, not hot yoga, no.
Oh, no, okay.
But I'm ambivalent because I'm worried they can get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I.
Okay, can I tell you, do you want to know how many yoga teachers I'm actually working with to get them stronger because they've gotten injured? 5. I work with 5 yoga teachers who are well-established, strong, well-known yoga teachers who come into me with back pain and hip pain and knee pain. Oh, and I've got somebody with a neck pain, neck injury.
Is that from a headstand?
Some of the hypermobility has contributed to to it, and some of the contributor has been their bodies have been shaped to adapt to one sport, which is that style of yoga that's completely compromised their balance and stability in the rest of their musculature. All right.
This is still filming, right?
Oh no, I'm just gonna get ruined.
I'm not actually I'm not like saying pro yoga. I'm just more so trying. No, here. It's here. My thought or question, I guess, I feel like there's people who it falls under yoga, but really what they're doing is more of like a mobility and a core strengthening and activation. And but because people don't know what to call it, they put it under the title of yoga sometimes.
Yes.
But where do you like?
There's no science. The yoga teachers are not taught the science.
But when
there's
people,
science
I feel
to
like
this.
some people want to do mobility, core strengthening, stuff like
Got
that.
it.
They just don't
Got
know
it.
where to find it or how to do it. So that's
Okay.
when they like fall to what
So-
yoga is.
So
and
that
sometimes
seems to be the
yeah.
go-to. Yeah, absolutely. But again, not everybody's bodies can just go, bam, here we go. This is the class. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, is this really for me? So not everybody's body is designed, but yes, I think you're absolutely right. It ends up being the go-to for people who feel like, oh, I want to work on my flexibility.
So what do you recommend then? Because not everyone can come see you and work with you all the time. So like what?
I know, but
For those who need that mobility and that
so-
core strengthening and that
I
muscle
agree.
activation.
Yeah. So the truth is, I would say, go find a damn good trainer who's NSCA and how to move, because increasing mobility, increasing flexibility is not just about lengthening a muscle. What you want to do is you want to build strength in the muscles, so you increase the muscles to capacity to be able to do more work. You can stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch, and 6 months later you're like, well, I've got 10% more flexibility. No, you actually have to build strength. There are power lifters who've got better flexibility than half my dancers. Stronger muscles can do more. Hope that helps. Yes?
I'd like to just reinforce your diversification
Thank you.
theory.
Thank
My
you.
dad played football at Syracuse in
Love it.
late 1940s,
Yeah.
and they were required to take ballet
Excellent.
because their coach felt that they needed to be diversified. He
That's
also
great.
did crew because they didn't allow them to do just
That's
one
great.
sport. And I think we have to realize that as we come around, that
Yeah.
diversification
no, I think it's
builds
brilliant.
a lot of cross-training and
Yep.
stronger muscle.
I have a couple of male dancers that I work with who are like 6'3" and 6'4", and Andy, if you saw some of these male dancers, first question is, and why are you not in a boat? Yeah.
Well, it's time the novice boys up for dance. If you'll get them in there, Peter.
I'll get him in there. I'll get him in there.
Cancel winter training right now.
No
I would love it.
So I think technically I'm done. I know my brain is fried. I really so appreciate you
thank you.
putting up with me. Thank you so much. It's a joy. Thank you. I do what I love, and I love what I do. So thank you for your time and attention. You guys
So,
are awesome.
yeah, really quick, maybe we can figure out a way to get your contact info to people that were
Sure.
here tonight if they have a follow-up question or something.
Yeah, great. Absolutely.
Another aspect we have to provide for everybody is we're calling them a one-page takeaway. And so if you look at the link at the top here, it's also on the CRI.
CRI Coach Education blog. So if you just go to CRI's webpage, if you go to Coach Education, we now have a blog. We're just going to store content from nights like this there.
Great.
So you can find the one-page takeaway. It's already up there. I'll post the video, some other stuff that we might create, and feel free to ask questions, give us topics to follow. Do you want to give us sort of a background on other stuff?
Yeah, definitely. The next two we have listed right in the bottom left corner there. So 12-19 and then 116 are going to be the next two meetings. And for those two, we're actually going to do a little different format. We're not going to have quite as much of a presenter bouncing questions off of. We're going to do CRI coaches bringing back information from Joy of Sculling and do more kind of a discussion base and see how that goes. So you guys will kind of be the test subjects for that. And then finally, we're trying to figure out the name for what we're going to call this. And so if anyone has any suggestions besides CRI Coach Roundtable, please don't hesitate to
I know Noel suggested finding free speed coach roundtables or something like that. FFS coach roundtables. And any ideas you have, they're welcome. We'll consider them. We can put together a list and maybe vote on them next time. I'll send a thank you. I'll include Peter's contact. I think you guys, the people that RSVP'd in the Google form through the Facebook page should have Peter's email, but I'll make sure to get everything and share it with you guys. And thank you. So.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh yeah, if you guys don't mind just checking off who was able to make it to, and if you didn't RSVP, if you could write it down. And then finally, if you don't mind bringing back a chair to the back room, that would be...
Well, they can just put them on the rack right there.
Yeah, great.
Oh yeah. We get 2 answers sometimes. Like jumps into the middle.
Yeah, that's a pretty sophisticated setup.
Larry Murray just commented on you.
What?
Here, you wanna? Let's see.
Oh, you have to like force it a little
Gotta figure out how to get the chat.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Have a nice snack.
I think Larry Murray, do you know?
Oh yeah, Larry Murray.
Yeah.
He's the head coach for, yeah.
He's been watching the whole time?
Oh, no shit.
He's the one.
Larry! Thanks, Larry. Have a good night.
Oh, that's great.